welcome to Burst the Bubble UK. I'm joined by Dr. Peter Chadha, co-chair, and Zaki Cooper, co-chair of the Indian Jewish Association. The unity between the Indian and Jewish community goes really far back, with Jews arriving in India as far back as 562 BCE. But I'm really interested in what you're doing specifically with the Indian Jewish Association. What exactly is it? What are your goals? How did it come to be?
I'll make a start, Zaki, and then maybe you can go in a bit more depth. The organisation started about 30 years ago when leaders from both communities realised that as diaspora coming into this country, we've been through the same sort of journeys. We have a lot of common interests, common values in our behaviours, and it was just a way of bringing the great and the good minds, bringing social interaction between the two groups to share common experiences and common values, and it's been really, really successful. Today we define those a bit more logically. Maybe Zaki will take you through that, but from my point of view, it's one of the ways that we can get cross-community collaboration and cohesion. Zaki?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, as Peter said, this is about the friendship between two communities. So the Indian community on the one hand, 1.5 million strong, with all its variety and sort of richness in that community, and the Jewish community, which it numbers about 300,000 and has been around in the UK for over 350 years. So there are certainly some differences in the kind of historical experience, and there's also differences in theology, but really the meeting point between these communities is really around values. We share so many common values in terms of our passion for education and the family and community and caring for the elderly. And I always say when Indians and Jews get a room together, there's such a natural chemistry and friendship. It's really, you create a buzz between these two communities.
And so how did you get into the sort of interfaith work in general? Like seeing these values, they're evidently really important, but what does that mean personally? How did that connect on a personal level?
So for me, as a Sikh growing up in this country, actually way back when, ancient times in the 1970s, there was a lot of conflict. Yeah, there was quite a lot of racism, hidden or blatant, and you know, I actually wasn't that bothered about my religion. I wore a turban and I was visibly religious, but I was more concerned with, you know, what values are in life. And I found that all these religions, to me, they tend to say the same things. You know, be good to one another, treat people with respect, love is a uniting factor in all of that. So by looking different, I've just wanted to show the world that I may look different, but I'm exactly the same as you. And in fact, in Sikhism, we believe that there's one light in everybody. We're all from the same creator. So you're my brother, even though you may look different, you're still from the same creator, just as the animals and other things are all part of that same creation. So that in my one-to-one relationships with people is important. But as I started to go through my career and I found out about different organizations, I found that the people who believed that we are all in the journey together, we all share life's trials and tribulations together, they were great people. And that's why getting involved in Interfaith is fabulous, you know. We're all on the great journey. So I got involved with the IJ about 15, maybe even a bit longer, 20 years ago, because I really enjoyed the chemistry of working with the people in that organisation. And Zaki, I think you worked for different ones as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, my sort of interest, well, I guess my interest in interfaith, to explain it, I think I have to go back to my school days, so when I was sort of your sort of age. And I went to a school where roughly a third of the demographic was Jewish, and a third was Asian, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, and a third was English, either Christian or secular. So it was a very mixed environment. And I always say I was doing interfaith every day without really realising it, just through interacting with people who were very different from me. And I think that's been a great sort of framework for my life from that point onwards. And then when I started working life, my second ever job, I had the privilege of working for the then Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who obviously as part of his role as a leading figure in the Jewish community interacts a lot with other faith communities. So in a way I was doing interfaith on a sort of professional level, and even when I left that post, I was really keen to continue it. So ever since then, I've sort of carved out time, and I left that job 15 years ago, to make time for really sort of building relationships between different faith groups, particularly between Jews and Christians. I'm a trustee of the CCJ, but also between Jews and the Indian community through the Indian Jewish Association.
And what do you think about, for the youth of today, what sort of interfaith values, do you think that they're getting sort of lost in today's society? Do you think that it needs encouragement, and where do you think that should come from, and what role should it play?
I think one of the problems in the internet world is people become more and more extreme in all sorts of things. So if I tell you to be a good Muslim, a good Jew, a good Sikh, and you have to have all these different criteria, and it's like a little checkbox, yeah? The internet creates people with checkboxes. Yeah, I've got to be this, 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 and you can get more and more and more into your own little bubble or niche, and there's always one-upmanship. So you can't just be a normal person, you've got to be better than the next person, better than the next person. And I think that's kind of one of the problems about society today. There is no mainstream. So I think it's more important now for us to make interfaith a kind of a specialisation as opposed to any religion a specialisation, to make people aware that to be a good human being is very important. Whatever your faith is, be a good human being first. What are the common values of human being? Love, kindness, care, concern for others, worrying about, not just yourself but society, because if there's no fabric for us to all walk on the same roads, then what kind of society are we living in? Whereas that kind of increasingly, I think, is very easy because, in the old days you had the BBC broadcasting mainstream or ITV, what have you, but today no one does that. They watch what they want to watch, and you can easily get cornered into something which is more and more and more extreme or refined or whatever the right words are. And our job, and I think what you're doing is a great job, is to say, actually, have your interests, but also have those same values, human values.
And as Peter said, you've got this phenomenon now of what people have called narrowcasting, whereas in the old days you'd basically have 4 TV channels, and you'd go into the office the next morning and everyone would be able to chat about what they saw on BBC One last night. Now there's so much media and so much choice. Everyone is often interacting with people who are just like them from their own religious, ethnic, social group, and there are dangers in that. And of course what we need to do is build the bridges between all these different groups in society. At the same time, I think it's also really important to say that interfaith is not just some sort of wishy-washy exercise where we all get together and just say, we're all really the same, because there's a distinctiveness in religion, but underlying that is a common humanity. But I always say that the starting point of really authentic interfaith is about being secure and sort of knowledgeable about your own identity, so you can then take that and bring that to the table and share that with others.
I think that the danger in all of this is when you're involved in any particular faith or any particular interest. It doesn't even have to be faith. People might be interested in, all sorts of, fortnight. That might be whatever the latest trend is. But otherness is an issue, right? So when we start to say, oh, they don't like fortnight, they like whatever it is, or they don't like Sikhism, they like this, it's the otherness is the problem. How we define other people, we dehumanize other people by saying, oh, they're not like us, they're a load of rubbish, right? So that's really where another aspect of interfaith is. It forces you to say, actually, they may look different, they may go to a synagogue and not go to a mosque, they may be, whatever that may be, but actually they're the same human beings who have the same experiences of being brought up as a child, having parents, growing up, dealing with adolescence, becoming an adult. They're the same life journeys. So we should look at how to share those with each other and learn from each other.
And I think the most powerful interfaith is often quite relationship based. Yes, there is a place for sitting around the table and comparing texts and our holy books, and as I say, there is merit in that. But actually, from what I've seen, the great sort of examples of interfaith relations have grown through sort of personal friendships and relationships, and sort of getting to know each other sort of well and truly and deeply over time.
Absolutely.
So do you think that society is moving towards the right place to get to that point? And if not, what needs to be done to be able to get to that point?
I think it's a very mixed picture. I mean, I think what offers hope is, for example, at the top level, you've got some great examples of friendships between sort of religious leaders. I was at the Holocaust Memorial Day event on Monday of this week, where the chief rabbi appeared alongside the Archbishop of Canterbury and a well-known imam as well. So I think those shows of solidarity are really important. As well, and it's not just at the elite level, you have over 250 interfaith organisations all over the UK. So in local communities all over the country, people are getting to know each other across the boundaries of faith. So that's good. On the other hand, we're seeing increasing discrimination against different groups. I think the Indian community have suffered from racism and discrimination over several years. I think obviously we know about the rising levels of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. Hate crime is up and has been up over the last few years, even predating Brexit. I don't think it's just a Brexit phenomenon. So I think, that makes it all the more important that people come together, make every effort to get to know people who are different to them, because the evidence shows that if you know someone outside your social group, you're more likely to have a favourable opinion of that social group in general.
And I think, if you think about growing up, when you have people who are different, it makes you richer, right? It makes you richer wealthy, but it makes you richer in knowledge. It makes you richer wealthy because you never know when their networks and when you can leverage that friendship. You can learn and grow together. Being confined, it's even like being confined to your local area. Or your local, now it's not an area, it's basically a virtual area, isn't it? It's on the internet. It could be all your friends will be of a particular type. That is poor. The greatest innovations, the greatest creations made by human beings are where people expand and they break outside of their comfort zone. And just by mingling with other people, you say, wow, that's interesting, I learned something, or that's a better way of doing it. Or if I take that and I add what we do, wow, I've got something amazing. So that's important. But also, as you go part of the interfaith journey, honestly, I tell you, it's so easy for people to break up and say, you're not like this or you're like this. But when you actually look at the real teachings of all faiths, for them to have survived hundreds or thousands of years means there must be some good thing in there. And that's what you should look at. Focus on what brings us together, and not if I wear this colour there's going to be a problem, or I do this is a problem. No, those are things I rally against.
And I think Indian Jewish Association is an interesting example, because we don't have big budgets or lots of paid staff, but what we are is, I think, an effective charity that relies on the goodwill of volunteers, and we bring people together often on shared topics. I mentioned love for family and community, but also business, the flair that both the Jewish and the Indian communities have in business and enterprise. We were partners in a really big conference held at Lord's Cricket Ground last year, which was really exciting to sort of bring that to the table. And I think, it shows that there's a lot that can be done when there is that sort of natural chemistry and friendship through the goodwill of good people. So I think we're a great example of
and we have many faiths within this, because obviously on the Indian side there are multiple faiths involved, and it just works like a family. That's the beauty of it, and people just get on, and they don't sit there looking at differences. They just say, yeah, let's have a party, let's have fun together, and we learn. It's there's no harm in learning through fun or learning by interaction. They're equally good as formally learning in a lesson.
And in the movement towards that unity, fundamentally, what do you think that unity should revolve around? Where should it come from?
I think it should come from the person. That's the way I think. I don't think it's an individual thing, but you have these forums, but it's an individual thing.
Yes. I mean, I think it's really looking in two directions at once always as people, which is, being proud of our particular identity, but also having that sense of the collective, the communal, the social, the Britishness. And I think actually, you never want to be too sort of self-congratulatory about it, but both the Indian and the Jewish community have been fantastic at balancing their own identities with a proud sense of patriotism and Britishness. I mean, you find some surveys that say actually people in those communities feel more British than, you know, people whose families have been here for hundreds and hundreds of years. So, no, I think there is something special there. And certainly, I think one other thing to mention about our charity is that whilst we're about the friendship between Indians and Jews, obviously the middle ground in that whole equation is the Indian Jewish community, which flourished for hundreds of years, as you said in the beginning, in different parts of India. And I guess, you know, I have some personal family history because my mother's family were from Calcutta and were there for about 150 years. And my late grandmother would always say India was the only place without any anti-Semitism. And I think India was a wonderful home for Jews. And now, as Indians and Jews, we find ourselves in Britain. And Britain is, despite all the problems and challenges, a wonderful home for us. And we want to try and make it an even better place, I think.
And I've got to say something that, you know, Britain's an amazing place. British values and decency and fairness and our legal system is not to be ignored or denigrated anyway. I think, you know, I travel the world. I've been to almost every corner of the world. Fascinating, even Australia, which is meant to be similar to Britain. What we have here is such a moderate, kind environment in which you can live compared to many, many other regimes. And, you know, Britain is a great home for all of us of any faith, if that's Christian, Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, whatever the faith is, they are treated well. And I think in this time when people have been worried about Brexit and other things going on, they have to look at this country's incorporation of anti-disability, anti-discrimination. We created all of these laws here ourselves. This is a fabulous country and it's got a fabulous judiciary, so that's a wonderful place to think about.
Yeah, it really is incredible as a development in sort of European society and Western society and throughout the world in general. Back in the times of Napoleon, he would ask the minority communities and sort of for the first time ask these communities, well, do you think you can be a French Jew or a French Sikh or a French whatever? You can have that duality, and these communities all wrote back and they said, yes, we can be a part of the society together. And as well, on the same side, on the Indian side of things, the ways that they were so open to these new communities coming in is something really incredible.
I think is also telling that the way you know, we integrate the European communities that have been coming in the last 20 or so years. Again, I think overall people are treated with fairness, and they're embodied in that organisation, you know, in society. We've been always not, you know, there will be people who will always discriminate. There will always be bad apples who say certain things. But as a society on the whole, I think the UK is a fabulous place. We do integrate well.
Yeah, I mean, America is often held up as the role model of a society that integrates different groups, and we hear about hyphenated identities. You've got American Indians, American Jews, American Italians, and so on. But I think Britain has also been good, maybe not so much hyphenated identity as dual identity. And I think, you know, again, and it's an idea borrowed from Rabbi Sachs, where he talks about identity as almost being like being multilingual, and we have to, in a way, speak these different languages and wear our identities. And Britishness is a big part of that. And in fact, with our organisation, the Indian Jewish Association, you know, we've often debated about bringing Britain or British into the name of the organisation, because it is about that relationship between British Indians and British Jews.
Yeah, and I really think that's, and I think at Burst the Bubble that is something that we're really sort of trying to do. We are sort of Burst the Bubble UK and looking at our communities in general and trying to sort of unite them and find these similarities, and we really appreciate what you do as well on that side.
I think it's always difficult in society. People are always looking for negative stories, and you know, it's human nature to focus on negativity, because we're born, you know, like you don't want to see a snake. You tell your child snakes are dangerous. tell other religions are dangerous, or you say all these things, but actually the good story here is, there are lots of people in Britain doing a good job of cross-community cohesion at a local level, at a national level, and I think what you're doing is fabulous. Actually, and it's really to be appreciated, because young people are going to be tomorrow's leaders. So that's what we need to see.
Yeah, I mean, if you listen to the news every night, news by definition is often very negative, things going wrong, bad things happening. But I think that's not the overall picture. And of course, a lot of the good work that takes place is slow and slightly invisible and below the radar. But it is happening, and Peter and I have seen it, and perhaps we're playing a small role in trying to catalyse some more of it. And also, kind of to reiterate what Peter said, great sort of pat on the back to all of you for bursting the bubble and taking this initiative, because I think you're stimulating conversations, which is part of what it's all about.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there is so much negativity, and it is just really great to bring back in the positivity. And it's really great that you're doing that as well. And really, thank you very much for your time and for all this. It's been really great. So thank you.
Thank you.